Freedom for all, freedom for all, freedom for all, freedom for all. Yeah! We pray for peace and unity
South Africa,
in our nation.
for one.
Nigeria,
and we can sing along.
Zimbabwe,
For one.
we are all one. Africa, Nigeria,
For one.
Burundi,
And we can smile again.
And welcome to the Black Book African History School of Thought, an initiative by the Black Book Club, a non-profit organization, of course, based in and around Cape Town. Welcome to the first of many of our lessons, or what we call them our School of Thought features. And throughout the entire series, we'll be taking you through a journey of Africa. We aim to teach, we aim to inform, and to generally share in our knowledge of Africa. We believe that Africa has a rich history, tradition, culture, which needs to be recorded throughout the length of time, so that it can forever endure in African history that Africa was once a great nation. Throughout our episodes, we'll be taking you on a rough course through the origins of Africa and African people. Don't forget to like our Facebook page. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Like and share the likes, because everyone must like, and that way we also like. African. The people whom are known to come from Africa. During this series, we will come to discover that all of us generally are African. We would come to discover that humanity comes from a lineage that dates back to one individual, to one created, to one being, that has culminated into over 50 billion today. Different races, different cultures, different traditions, but it all derives from one. And it is undisputed that that one was created here in Africa. Part of what we need to do is learn our history, as I do not believe that anyone that knows the amounts of contribution Africa has had to mankind would believe that all hardships faced in Africa, Africa cannot defeat. Those are the words of Thabo Mbeki, former president of South Africa. Africa has the longest life activity in the entire world when compared to other continents. The San people are genetically the oldest people in the world, which boast the oldest language in the world. Right here in the caves of Sterfontein, Stephen Mofumi matched bone fragments with earlier discoveries to formulate a skull that was over 305 million years old. They call that skull the Australopithecus. There is no doubt at all, that civilization or Africa created humanity, created mankind. Which leaves one to ask one of the most important questions of all. If there is such a person whom is termed as Adam and Eve, or whomever you wish to call it, surely that person must have lived on Africa. Surely that person must have been created in Africa. Surely that person looked like ordinary Africans. The sand villages found in the Kalahari Desert near Botswana are known to be the oldest hunter-gatherers still present in a modern civilization. It is a culture that has stood the test of time. A culture that is true to the origins of the first created. It is an African culture. These are the things that we should take pride in, the things that we should rediscover, the things that are enduring within our heritage. The ancient Sand people are known to have lived near small lakes of pond and constructed small structures of shelter, which suggests that as far as time can tell, family structures have always been part and parcel of the African traditions, of the African culture. They created these huts and shelters to house their families. They generally hunted small animals, and they would eat the big animals if they found them dead. But they were never active huntsmen. They never hunted for sport. They appreciated what is called the respects of laws, of natural laws. There is a mutual respect, or there was a mutual respect when it comes to the living, which cannot talk, which form part and parcel of what we call nature, as well as the living, which can talk, which form part and parcel of humanity. Africa's tradition, its culture, it is all built and created around a sound ecosystem built from mutual respect. The woman gathered food as well as the plantation, and the man would often hunt the small animals. That tradition exists from Cape to Cairo. It is a similarity in which almost all ancient African tribes possessed. It is a way of living. It is a culture which existed in Africa at a time where it was stated that Africa has no culture or traditions. of this created being that you must know that comes from one ultimately culminated into 4 major groups. We generally call those groups the Afro-Asiatic group, which would consist of the Arabic, the Kushite, the Amharic, the Afro-Asians, and even the Berber. That group is what we would generally call the Afro-Asiatic group, which developed their own languages and developed their own cultures further, and of course expanded into Africa. The second group in Africa, which almost all cultures come from, would be the Nilo-Saharan group, consisting of the Chadian, the Eastern Sudanic, the Eastern Adamawa, as well as the Songhai group. And the Songhai is particularly known because it had a great empire which conquered many lands, and of course which today is still reminisced as one of the greatest African empires that ever existed. It comes from this group, the Nilo-Saharan group. The third group, which also developed its own languages as well as its own cultures further, is what we call the Niger-Kodofayen group. Niger-Kodofayen group, where it comprises of the group of people from the Mande, the Voltic, the Kwa, as well as the Bantu Congo group. And the Bantu Congo group nowadays, they generally migrated southwards as well as eastwards during what we termed as the Great Migration at the time, and particularly culminated into further groups which are known in South Africa as the Zulu, the Xhosa, the Sotho, the Tswana. They all form part of this Bantu group, which comes from the Niger-Kodofayen, which is the third most dominant group, which ultimately led to various other tribes. And the fourth group is the Khoisan group, and from the Khoisan developed the San, the Khoi. The Afro-Asia group came the tribes from Arabic tribes, the Kushite tribes, the Amharic tribes, the Berber tribes. From the Nilo-Saharan group came the Eastern Sudanic, the Eastern Adamawa, and from the Niger-Kodofayen came the Voltic, the Bantu Congo, and from the Khoisan, of course, was the Khoi and the San group. Now, how did civilization come to be? Well, in Africa, the greatest thing that created many civilizations is certainly not the mind of human beings, but comes from nature, which inspired human beings to form this great civilization. And this civilization come particularly because they were built in and around this particular thing. And this great thing is what we know as the longest river in the world, stretching from Central Africa to the Mediterranean Sea. It stretches for more than 600,000 kilometers. It is one of the earliest sources of water for mankind. It still exists to this day. We call this thing the Nile River. The Nile River formulated civilizations such as Kemet, civilizations such as Nubia, Napata. The Nile River was single-handedly and directly the influence of what would be great power in Africa. As you know, the Nubia went on to formulate what we know nowadays as the Great Egyptian Empire. Kemet. Some call it a place of the Black Land, a place filled with people who are melanin infused, dark people who would later symbolize what it means to be African. They all trace their source of power to nature, the Nile River, something in which was not created by mankind, but was created by the very source that created the first man, Adam or Eve, created in this very place, in which houses what we call the cradle of life. As we end off today's episode, I will leave you with the food for thought. Who is Adam and Eve? What did they look like?
Freedom for all, freedom for all, freedom for all. Yeah! We pray for peace and unity.
South Africa,
in our nations.
for one.
Nigeria,
Together we can sing along.
Zimbabwe,
For one.
we are all one. Africa, Nigeria,
For one.
Burundi,
Together we can smile again.
Somalia,
For one.
we are all one. Africa,
Umntu ngabantu. Just need to teach them principles zakwantu. Umntu wethu, umntu ngabantu. Ukuthetha khona yekufaka ibhathu. Hayi shu, why bro? You is me, I is you too. Am I fooled by this view? Luxury from privilege.